Hey there, it's SagaTwist. Tonight we begin your journey into the Starlit Vale, a land suspended between dreams and starlight. Here, magic isn't loud. It hums like wind through grass, and fate doesn't roar. It whispers, waiting to be heard by those still enough to listen. Each night we'll explore new places, meet mythical beings, and uncover gentle mysteries. You don't need to worry about where it's going, you just need to rest. Let your body grow still, let your breath slow. Let the story carry you like a leaf on quiet water. Now close your eyes and let the veil open. Kyle never expected his life to change. Not really. He lived at the edge of the Mornwood in a village where the days were slow and the skies always looked like they were about to remember something important. He worked in the village library, a great crooked thing built from pale blue stone and covered in sleeping vines. He dusted ancient scrolls, copied unreadable texts, and often lingered in the topmost tower, reading by candlelight while the wind scratched gently at the windows. Most thought Kyle liked being alone, but in truth Kyle was waiting. For what, he didn't know, only that it would come quietly, like a breath before a word. And then, one evening, it arrived. He had been organizing a shelf no one used, way in the back, behind a velvet curtain and a row of warped ladders, when he found a scroll unlike any he'd seen. It was wrapped in a ribbon of starlight, or at least that's how it seemed in the candle glow. The parchment pulsed faintly, warm to the touch, though no fire had touched it. Kyle unrolled it slowly. The ink shimmered silver. There were no words, only stars arranged like a map. But as he stared, the stars shifted, and a single phrase appeared, written in flowing, delicate script. "Return, and the veil will remember you." Kyle blinked. The candle flickered. The stars faded. The scroll went dark. But that night, Kyle dreamed. He stood in a meadow of swaying grasses, where the sky shimmered like water, and the wind spoke in hushed syllables. And from the sky came a creature unlike any he had ever seen, long and sleek, with wings like mist and eyes like slow-turning moons. "You have been called back," the creature said without moving its mouth. "We are ready to begin again." Kale awoke with a start, heart steady, breath slow. There, at the edge of his open window, stood the creature from his dream, perched like a ghost of starlight. Its body curled like ink in water, its wings folded neatly against its sides. "My name is Mira," she said, voice clear, melodic. "The path to the veil is opening again, and you are the first to feel it." Kyle didn't ask questions, he didn't pack. He simply took the scroll, tucked it into his coat, and followed Mira beyond the edge of the village, beyond the Mornwood trees. The path they took did not appear in daylight. It shimmered faintly under starlight, a silver thread running beneath the roots and moss. The world around them grew quieter, not silent, but hushed, as if the air itself were waiting. "Where are we going?" Kale asked finally. Mira looked at him. "To the heart of something forgotten." They passed under arches of bone-white trees, and beside streams that sang in languages Kyle did not know. He felt no fear, only recognition, as if each step were a return, not a departure. Eventually they came to a hill. It rose above the clouds. The stars above looked closer, and below it, the veil, vast and shadow-drenched, glittering with small lanterns of fireflies and ruins barely visible through the mist. There were towers covered in ivy, bridges broken by time, rivers that ran uphill, and forests that seemed to blink when no one looked. Mira turned to him, eyes shining. "This is only the beginning." And Kale, standing at the edge of everything he once doubted, smiled softly, because the dream had woken him. But the veil would let him finally sleep. Kale and Mira walked, long into the night. The silver-threaded path beneath their feet shimmered faintly under starlight, winding through rolling mist and stone arches swallowed by ivy. The air grew cooler, quieter, still. Ahead a forest waited. It was not like the Mornwood, no birds, no wind, only trees, tall and glass-barked, their trunks smooth and silver blue, their leaves like sheets of paper, rustling without breeze. "This is the Murmuring Hollow," Mira said gently. "It listens." Kyle tilted his head. To what? To everything. Her gaze flicked upward, but mostly to what we try not to say. They stepped beneath the canopy. The trees stretched high, impossibly tall, reaching like thoughts never spoken. And as Cale walked, he heard it. Soft murmurs, faint echoes, whispers that weren't quite sound. He turned. Nothing. Only trees. But a moment later, a voice, his own, floated by him like a breeze. I never truly belonged in that village. Cale froze. The forest repeats what lives inside you, Mira said softly, walking past. If you fear it, it will echo fear. If you lie to yourself, it will speak the truth for you. A chill brushed Kyle's spine, not from cold, but from something intimate, honest. The hollow didn't want to scare them. It wanted to show them. Further in, they came upon another traveler, a small figure cloaked in moss and feathers, sitting cross-legged beneath a glowing mushroom tree. Well now, the figure said in a raspy voice. It's been some time since the Vale sent anyone with stars in their eyes. Mira inclined her head. Greetings, Branwick. The figure stood, a gnome-like creature with wild white hair and eyes like marbles left in moonlight. He wore a backpack twice his size and carried a wooden staff carved with little bells that didn't ring. I stayed here too long, Branwick said, peering at Cale. Tried to keep my thoughts silent, but silence is still a sound here. Cale nodded slowly. What happens if we stay too long? The forest remembers more of you than you do. Eventually, it starts sharing your thoughts before you even have them. Mira stepped forward. We'll only pass through. As they moved deeper, Kyle heard more whispers. Not just his, but Branwick's, Mira's, and others. Echoes from those who had walked the hollow long ago. Regrets, hopes, laughter and sorrow braided into the bark and leaves. 1,000 lives, overlapping in trees that remembered. Then came the clearing. In the center stood a single black tree, short, gnarled and pulsing, faintly with violet light. Its bark was scorched, its branches bent like broken fingers. That's where the hollow's memory is stored, Mira whispered. Touch it, and you'll see what the forest sees. Kyle stepped forward. Branwick held him back. Once, you touch it, it touches back. Kyle hesitated, then reached out. His fingers brushed the bark, warm, not rough. And then he saw flashes, not images, emotions. Children hiding in trees from something unseen. A mother whispering lullabies to moss. A wolf made of ash howling at a bloodless moon. A name he didn't recognize, but felt like it belonged to him. And then stillness. He opened his eyes. The black tree no longer glowed. It remembers you now, Mira said. What did it show you? Branwick asked. Cale shook his head slowly. Not memories, your promises. Things I haven't lived yet. Branwick grinned. Then you're part of it now. Mira gestured to the path. We move on. And so they left the hollow, though part of it followed. Gentle whispers tucked behind Kyle's ears. Not unkind. Just curious. At the forest's edge, Kyle turned back. The silver trees swayed slowly, and one final whisper brushed his mind. We remember you, dreamer. The path from the murmuring hollow led Kyle and Mira into an open plain bathed in soft light. Neither dawn nor dusk, but something in between. The sky above shimmered in shades of blue and gold, and floating stones hung weightless in the air, turning lazily like dandelion seeds. They reached a rise where the earth dipped sharply downward, and there, cutting through the valley like a mirror split down the middle, flowed a river. But this river was no ordinary one. It ran backward. Leaves that had fallen into it floated upstream. Ripples curved in reverse. A fish leapt into the air and landed before it had ever jumped. The entire surface gleamed like crystal, but moved like wind-blown silk. Cale stood quietly. It's beautiful. That is the Namaril, Mira said. The glass river. It flows through the past, not the present. We're going to cross it? Mira gave a soft nod. We must, but time does not let go easily. As they descended toward the river's edge, They passed a series of glowing stones placed in spirals and circles. Each one emitted a gentle hum, like distant singing bowls, soothing and strange. By the bank, a figure waited. She wore robes of sheer shadow and silver thread. Her face was veiled, but her voice was calm and warm. "I am Senna, keeper of currents," she said. "You seek to cross the Namaril?" Kyle stepped forward. "Yes." "Then the river must remember you. Step into the shallows. Let it see you, not as you are, but as you were." Kyle obeyed. The moment his feet touched the water, he felt it. Not cold, but deep. A depth not of distance, but of memory. He saw flashes, a childhood moment, crying in the rain, lost in a crowd. A quiet birthday alone, watching the candle flicker before blowing it out. A missed chance, a kind word never said, and something else. A memory he didn't remember. Himself, standing by the river, but older, smiling, speaking words he couldn't. Yet here the water shimmered, and then it stilled. Senna bowed. "The river knows you. You may cross." Mira stepped beside him. "You saw something?" Kyle nodded slowly. A future that felt like a memory. "That is what this river shows best," Mira said. "The past that still waits to happen." They stepped onto a bridge made of braided moon vines, thin but strong. The river flowed backward beneath them, each ripple carrying a piece of someone's yesterday. On the far side, wild lilies bloomed in midair, and the wind carried soft laughter from voices long gone. As they reached the other bank, Kyle looked back. The water seemed still for a moment, and then just before they turned to leave, he saw himself, his future self, standing in the water, smiling softly, a lantern in one hand. "You'll come back," the vision said without speaking. "But you won't be the same." And then the river rolled on, backward as ever, whispering secrets in the language of time. Kale and Mira walked on, toward the mountains that shimmered like ice and cloud, and the sky behind them folded slowly into stars. The path after the glass river curved gently into the shadow of a great sloping mountain, its peak lost in cloud, its sides wrapped in deep blue moss. It didn't loom with menace. It rested, as if it were not simply a mountain, but a creature in a long, patient slumber. Mira slowed her pace. "This is Varethos," she whispered, "the sleeping one. Beneath it lies a city forgotten by time." Kyle felt the shift in the air, thicker, more dreamlike, as though each breath carried echoes of another age. As they descended a winding staircase carved into the stone, glowing insects lit the way in warm pulses of amber. The rock around them hummed ever so gently, as if singing to itself in sleep. At the base of the stairway, the cavern opened into a wide, domed chamber. There, resting beneath the mountain's heart, was the hidden city of Caer Loriel. Its towers were carved directly from the crystal-streaked stone, spiraling upward in elegant curls. Bridges made of luminous rope vines connected balconies and bell towers. Trees with translucent leaves grew out of walls, shedding soft light with every breath. The city was alive, but silent. "It's so quiet," Kyle said softly. "Because the city dreams," Mira replied. "When Varethos sleeps, so does Caer Loriel. Its people vanished long ago, but some say their spirits still walk here, whispering through the lanterns." Kyle noticed them then, hundreds of hanging lanterns swaying gently in the still air. Inside each one, tiny orbs of mist drifted, pulsing like slow heartbeats. As they walked further in, a sound stirred, deep and melodic, like wind chimes echoing underwater. They followed it. In the central courtyard, where 4 great statues stood, one for each season of the Vale, a figure was waiting. Not quite a person, not quite a ghost. He shimmered like heat over stone, his robes stitched from threads of shadow and crystal dust. His eyes were closed, but he spoke clearly. "Another dream walker," the figure said, "and you bring the guide of skyborn memory." Mira gave a respectful bow. "We seek the chamber of echoes." The figure opened his eyes, pure white without pupils. "Then the mountain must test you." He turned and the courtyard split open. not violently but smoothly, revealing a spiral staircase that glowed from within. A soft sigh echoed through the cavern, and Kyle felt the air tremble slightly beneath his feet. "One of you must descend alone," the figure said. "Only then will the chamber answer." Kyle looked to Mira. "I'll wait for you," she said, "but be careful. The echoes don't just show you the past. They ask you what you're willing to forget." Kyle nodded and descended. The staircase spiraled endlessly downward, and the light grew dimmer, warmer, until it felt like the inside of a memory. Walls flickered with shadows of things Kale recognized: his childhood room, the first book he'd ever loved, the night sky over his village. The Chamber of Echoes waited at the bottom. No doors, no walls, just space, shaped by thought. And then the echoes came, soft at first, his own voice asking questions he didn't remember asking. What if you're not meant for greatness? What if the veil is only showing you what you want to see? Would you trade a future for a truth? The questions circled him like mist, and then a final whisper, one that didn't come from Kyle. Would you give up your name to walk? Further? The space shimmered. A path appeared, lit by soft blue lights. Kyle took a breath. "I would." The path solidified, the echoes stilled, and Kale walked forward, leaving something behind. When he returned to Mira, he looked unchanged, but quieter somehow, lighter. "What did you leave?" she asked gently. "I'm not sure," he said honestly, "but I think it was something I didn't need anymore." Behind them, the city pulsed once. Then the lights of Cayo L'Oriel dimmed, like a dream finally ready to end. And ahead, the mountain opened once more, revealing a staircase of stardust leading up to the sky. The staircase of stardust wound upward in soft, glowing turns, lifting Kale and Mira through the mountain's hollow core. At the summit, the stone gave way to cloud, and the stars stretched closer than ever before. They emerged beneath a velvet, sky-dusted in violet light. Before them stretched an enormous floating bridge, woven from golden thread and soft rope vines, suspended over nothingness. Beyond it, a city shimmered in the air. Domed tents swayed in invisible wind, market stalls floated without anchors, and signs blinked in dozens of strange alphabets. Bells rang, wind chimes hummed, and distant music rose and fell like the breath of a sleeping giant. This was Esthara, the market of the impossible. "It only appears once every 10 years, Mira whispered, "and only to those who've given something up." Kale looked around in awe. Every stall was different, some made of shifting light, others formed from living crystal or pages from unwritten books. As they stepped onto the floating market, voices rose around them. Dreams bottled fresh. Yesterday's promises. 2. For 1. Trade a memory, gain a miracle. Creatures from every corner of the Vale roamed the pathways. A six-eyed moth vendor selling moonlight in jars, a snail the size of a cart offering weather in folded parchment, a horned woman whispering fortunes into people's shadows. Kyle paused at a stall where a pale merchant, neither young nor old, sat behind a table of smooth silver spheres. "What do these do?" Kyle asked. "Each one contains a version of your life," the merchant said. "Lives not chosen, paths not taken, but you may only see one." Kale hovered his hand over a sphere. "Wait," Mira said gently. "Come, there's something else we need to find." They passed under floating banners and bridges shaped like serpents and climbed a spiraling staircase that had no steps, just ripples of gravity that carried them upward. At the very top of the market sat a forgotten stall, shrouded in shadows and silence. A single figure stood behind it, a man with silver hair and a blindfold of woven twilight. "Welcome," he said. "I sell what cannot be found, only remembered. We seek a map," Mira said, "to the wellspring of what never was." The blindfolded man nodded once, slowly. "Then you'll need to pay in truth." He turned to Kale. "Tell me something real, something you've never said aloud. Only then can the way forward appear." Kale hesitated. He felt the weight of the veil pressing gently around him, urging honesty not as a demand, but as a key. "I was afraid," Kyle said finally. "Before I ever left home, I thought I was supposed to be more. I didn't think I was enough to carry any story worth telling." The blindfolded man smiled. "You are now." He reached beneath the stool and drew out a scroll of smoke, which unfolded mid-air into glowing lines. "Follow this," he said. "But beware. What never was still remembers what it might have been." Kyle took the scroll. It vibrated in his hands like a heartbeat. They turned to go, but before they could descend, the market shifted. The floating stalls dimmed. A hush fell over the sky. A ripple moved through the crowd. Not fear. Not quite, but recognition. A figure had arrived, tall, cloaked in deep blue flame with no face, only a smooth obsidian mask. Every vendor went silent. "Who is that?" Kyle whispered. "A collector," Mira replied, her voice low. "They deal in futures, and sometimes take them." The collector's gaze swept the market, but passed over Kale and Mira without pause. The moment faded. The lights returned. Conversation resumed, as if nothing had happened. But Kale felt something unseen, now watching. Waiting. As they left the market, the scroll of smoke pulsed gently in his hands, leading them onward to the next impossible place. The scroll of smoke unwound as Kale and Mira stepped beyond Esthara, its glowing thread stretching forward into the night. It led them through a vast field of floating stones, each one humming with soft tones, forming a melody that only the stars seemed to understand. Eventually, the ground beneath their feet fell away entirely, replaced by a series of pale white arches, thin as bone and strung together with strands of silver light. This was no ordinary bridge. It did not stretch over anything but between, connecting two moons that orbited one another like dancers in slow motion. The moons glowed with gentle light. One was smooth and quiet, shrouded in misty blues. The other was rougher, pockmarked with ancient runes that flickered. Like fading embers, between them the bridge trembled, alive and listening. "This is Lunareth," Mira said. "The moon path. It appears only during rare alignments, and only to those carrying a question heavy enough to be felt in the sky." Kyle glanced ahead. The bridge narrowed to a single strand at its highest point, where wind and silence held court together. As they stepped onto it, Kyle felt weightless. Not floating, more like memory itself, slipping free from the bounds of now. Each step echoed with thoughts he hadn't realized he carried. He remembered his parents' faces, half hidden by fog and time. He remembered the smell of summer fields, the chill of first frost, the sound of his name said by someone who had once loved him and was now forgotten. He remembered, not answers, but long-held questions. At the bridge's midpoint, a figure waited. It was not made of flesh or light, but something in between, a celestial being shaped from moon shadow and feathered starlight. Its face shifted like water over glass, always on the edge of being known. "You seek the wellspring," the being said. Its voice sounded like wind through crystal. "And yet you carry doubt." Kale stepped forward. "I do." "Then let the bridge decide." The creature opened its hands, revealing two small stones, one as dark as void, the other glowing faintly with the light of dawn. "Choose. One will answer the question you do not know you're asking. The other will take it away." Kyle looked to Mira, but she said nothing. This was his choice. He reached out, hesitated, and chose the dark stone. The moment his fingers closed around it, the bridge shifted. Stars above twisted. The moons pulsed in harmony. Kyle closed his eyes. And then, he was no longer on the bridge, stood in a desert of silver sand, beneath an ocean of turning stars. A woman stood before him, her eyes mirrors, her cloak woven from echoes. "You do not yet understand the cost of the wellspring," she said. "Then teach me." "Very well," she replied. "But first, know this truth. You are not a visitor in the Vale. You are a piece of it. You did not come here to seek. You were called." The vision shattered gently, like frost touched by sunlight. Kale stood once more on the bridge, the dark stone still in his hand. It had crumbled to dust. The celestial being nodded. "Now you carry a heavier truth. The path will grow stranger." Kale exhaled. He felt changed. but in ways he couldn't name yet. Together, he and Mira continued, descending the final arc of the bridge toward a land where trees grew upside down and the sky whispered secrets in the voice of wolves. As the moons drifted, apart the bridge dissolved behind them, and ahead the Vale prepared its next story. Beyond the fading bridge, Cale and Mira descended into a wide valley shrouded in silver mist. The trees here didn't grow up, but out. Their roots spiraled into the sky like reaching fingers, and their trunks burrowed into the earth beneath. Vanishing into the soil as if hiding ancient secrets, they had entered the grove of speaking roots, a place where memory took root, and language did not belong to mouths, but to the soil, to the air, to the dreaming trees. As Cale stepped between two gnarled hovering roots, the air thickened, not oppressively but densely. Each breath tasted of sap and ash, and a low hum threaded through his chest. "Be still," Mira said gently. "They're listening." The grove pulsed with thought. The leaves shimmered in waves, and with every rustle came words, not spoken, but felt. "He walks with questions curled like smoke. The girl carries loss beneath her name. Their story presses against our bark. Let it in." Cale placed a hand on one of the inverted trees. The bark was warm. The moment he touched it, images bloomed behind his eyes. A child alone in a room of silence, a lantern flickering at the edge of sleep, a door he had never opened. Until now, the root shifted above them, rearranging into an archway of braided wood and light. Beneath it stood a creature half made of moss and light, a root teller. Its eyes were deep knots in its bark-like face. Vines wove through its shoulders, pulsing gently with color. "You seek the wellspring," it said. "Yes," Kyle answered. "Then you must plant something of yourself here. Something real. Something you'd rather keep." Kyle glanced at. Mira then stepped forward. From his satchel he pulled out a worn leather ribbon, the last thing his mother had given him before he left. He hesitated, then slowly, gently, he laid it between the roots. The ground shimmered, and the ribbon was drawn down into the soil like a seed. The root teller smiled. "Now the grove remembers you." A circle of trees around them opened their roots, revealing stairs that spiraled downward, not into darkness, but into remembrance. "Come," Mira said. "The roots will show us the next truth." They descended together. Below the grove, the world was hushed. The walls were lined with memories etched in glowing script, moments harvested from every traveler who had left something behind. Kyle saw them flash past as they walked, a warrior weeping at a quiet funeral, her child casting a shadow taller than themselves, a queen laughing in the rain alone. Then came his memory, not a tragic one, just a quiet one. He was 5, sitting in the grass, watching a firefly land on his hand, wondering if magic was real. The vision faded. "What is this place?" Kyle asked. "The roots do not just speak," Mira said. "They remember. This is where the Vale stores what we forget, or choose to let go." At the lowest chamber, the tunnel opened to a still pond, its surface smooth and silver, untouched by time. "This is the mirror water," Mira said softly. "You can ask it one question, only one." Kyle knelt beside it, thinking carefully. Then he whispered, "Why me?" The water rippled, and his reflection changed. He saw himself, older, cloaked in blue light, standing at the edge of a rift in the world, holding a lantern not unlike the one his mother used to light at dusk. Beside him were faces he hadn't met, yet behind him shadows, before him stars. The pond stilled. Cale stood. He didn't have an answer, but he had a path. As they left the grove, the roots above them swayed gently, offering no words, only the rustling comfort of something ancient that had seen countless lives pass through. And as night gave way to a sleepy dawn, the scroll in Cale's satchel pulsed again, pointing toward a place Mira had only heard of in whispered stories, the library that dreams of you. The scroll pulsed gently in Cale's satchel as they climbed out of the grove's deep memory. The Vale had grown quieter. The wind now carried the scent of parchment and candle wax, an odd comfort in the wilderness. There were no birds here, no animals, only the soft sound of pages turning from somewhere unseen. They followed the scent and the sound until they reached it. A tower made entirely of books stood crooked against a purple sky. It leaned like a sleeping man, propped up by shelves that spiraled endlessly outward in all directions. Great floating bookshelves drifted around it, some vanishing into the clouds, others anchored by ropes of ink and smoke. This was the library. That dreams of you. It had no door, only a blank page hanging mid-air, rippling softly. Mira stepped forward and pressed her palm to the page. It turned itself, and the air folded in half. Kyle blinked, and they were inside. Books lined every surface. Some shelves bent like trees, some climbed into infinity. The books themselves rustled, sighed, and whispered among one another like gossiping spirits. A small creature padded up to them on silent feet. It looked like a fox carved from bookmarked leather, its eyes shimmering with typewritten letters. "Welcome," it said, "to the archive of unwritten selves." Kyle tilted his head. "You can talk? Only while you're dreaming, which you are, in a way." It led them through corridors where books shelved themselves and ladders moved on their own. The fox occasionally stopped to sniff a spine or scold a manuscript that had wandered off. Eventually they reached a quiet corner, a space where the light dimmed and the books no longer whispered. There sat a chair made of quilted thoughts, and a table covered in open journals, all blank except one. Kyle approached. The journal had his name on the cover, Kyle, Seeker of the Vale. He opened it. Each page wrote itself as he read it. Moments from his past, conversations with Mira, the bridge between moons, even the dream of the Vale calling to him before he ever knew it had a name. He turned another page, and it didn't write itself. Instead, a question appeared. "What story will you become if you finish this one?" Kyle swallowed. Behind him, a slow, deliberate voice echoed from the shadows. "Careful with answers, traveler." An old man stepped forward, his robe stitched from library cards, his beard made of paper strips. His eyes were unreadable. I'm the archivist. I keep what never was written, and guard what should never be read." Mira stiffened. "We seek the path to the wellspring," she said. The archivist raised a weathered brow. "Then you'll need to leave something behind. Again. But not an object this time, a version of yourself." He turned to Kyle. "Write a truth you believe about yourself. Then tear the page out," Kyle thought. Then slowly, with shaking fingers, he wrote, "I am only here by accident. I was never meant to be more than ordinary." He tore the page. It dissolved into starlight. The books around them rearranged violently. Shelves spun, ladders bent, and a great map unfurled from the ceiling down to the floor. It pulsed with ink, shaping and reshaping until a glowing path pointed forward. The archivist nodded. "You may now travel into the dreaming spine. But beware, it remembers every story that's ever been unwritten, including the ones that never should be." Kyle nodded, heart heavy and calm. The fox thing returned, gently biting the hem of Mira's cloak. "Come now," it said softly. "There are books that need forgetting." Together they left the library, stepping into a corridor made of pages and starlight, where a new part of the Vale waited, stranger and darker than before. And above them, the Vale turned its eyes to their story once more. Beyond the living library, Kyle and Mira followed the path inked in starlight. It led them to a narrow mountain range. Its jagged peaks curved like the ribs of some long-dead creature. The wind here didn't blow. It hummed like an old lullaby, hummed by something enormous in its sleep. They had reached the dreaming spine. Mira stopped at the base of the first slope, where the stone glowed faintly with silver veins. "They say this was once the skeleton of the world serpent," she said softly. "It fell into a dream and never woke. The mountains grew around it." Kyle felt it too. This place wasn't dead. It was dreaming, and somehow their footsteps were the things waking it up. As they climbed, strange shapes stirred beneath the rocky surfaces, like stories sealed in stone, turning in their sleep. The path curved sharply through a narrow canyon where bones the size of trees jutted from the cliffs. Old symbols had been carved into them, runes that pulsed faintly in rhythm with Kale's heartbeat. A voice echoed, not aloud, but inside his mind. You have no name here, only echoes of what you could become. Kale staggered slightly. Mira caught him. Don't listen too long, she warned. The spine is made of old tales, half-written and hungry. They continued. At the canyon's end was a gate of broken dreams, floating fragments of doors, each from a different world. One was made of frozen mist, another of woven hair. One even looked like it had been carved from Kale's childhood desk. Guardian waited, a creature tall and eyeless, draped in torn scrolls. In one hand it carried a chain of keys, in the other a mirror. To pass, it said, you must walk through the door that fears you most. The doors spun slowly in the air. Kyle approached. As he neared, one door pulsed. It looked normal. Wooden, familiar. It was the door to his bedroom back home. He touched the handle and was pulled through. He stood in his old room. Dusty light filtered through the curtains. Everything was as he left it, but something was wrong. There were no shadows, not even his own. The room was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then the voice returned. If you could go back, would you still leave? Would you still become what you are now? Kale saw a figure sitting on the bed. It looked exactly like him, only tired. Smaller. This version of Kale looked up. We could have stayed, he said. We could have lived quietly. We didn't need to chase magic, not really. Kyle knelt. But I did, he whispered, because something inside me knew I was meant for more than quiet. The other Kyle nodded, smiling sadly. Then go. But take this, so you never forget the part of you that could have stayed. The double faded into mist, and in its place lay a folded piece of paper. Kyle picked it up and stepped back through the dream door. Mira stood waiting, and the Guardian nodded, allowing them through. Beyond the gate, the mountain opened into a hidden plateau. At its center stood a tree grown from stone and memory. Its branches reached into the clouds, its roots wrapped around a glowing pool of black water. This was the next step, the well of unspoken ends. Drink, Mira said, voice barely audible. It will show you a future you're not meant to see, but need to understand. Kale approached, the paper still in his hand. He unfolded it just once. It read, There's strength in staying too. He smiled, then drank. Visions crashed over him like waves, fire, stars, laughter, tears, faces he hadn't yet met, a choice, a fall, a rising, a final door, then silence. He opened his eyes and knew. The wellspring was close, not in miles, but in meaning. The well of unspoken ends faded behind them, its waters settling back into silence, as if no truth had ever stirred their surface. The mountain winds had calmed. Even the stars above the dreaming spine blinked slower, casting elongated shadows across the valley below. Kyle and Mira descended in silence, each lost in thought. Kyle still clutching the folded note that reminded him of who he might have been. Ahead, the land stretched flat and grey like forgotten parchment. A low mist clung to the ground, rolling between crooked stones and ancient statues, half swallowed by the soil. Trees with hollowed trunks leaned together in strange formations, as if frozen mid-whisper. Mira paused. We're here. Kyle looked around. Where? She didn't answer immediately. Her voice, when it came, was hushed. This is the hollow where time forgot. Days do not pass here, nor do nights. All moments here are stitched together by memory and regret. Kale felt it then, that odd sense that no moment could stretch forward or backward. Only now existed, and even that was slipping sideways. They wandered through a grove of stone trees, their leaves long since fossilized. Each one bore a carving, names, in languages Kale had never seen, but somehow understood. Larith, who waited too long. Asher, who almost chose Thorn, who looked back once. Mira touched one of the names gently. These are the ones who tried to carry the past forward. They couldn't let go. Kyle shivered, not from cold, but from a strange familiarity, as if the air around him had tried to remember his name and had forgotten halfway through. Then he heard it, whispers, at first just one, then many, folding over one another like threads of silk. Kyle, you still have time. Or do you? It's not too late. It's always too late. Turn around, go back. Go. You're almost safe. He covered his ears, but it didn't help. Mira grabbed his hand and pulled him forward. Ignore them. The hollow feeds on hesitation. It feeds on the stories we don't finish. They reached the center of the hollow, a great sundial, shattered and covered in moss. Time had literally broken here. Each shard of the dial still ticked in a different rhythm, and standing atop its center was a woman made of clocks. Her eyes ticked. Her fingers spun. Her voice, when she spoke, was the slow toll of a distant bell. Welcome, travelers. You are out of time. Kyle frowned. What does that mean? It means your past has caught up, your future has turned away, and now you must choose. Stay and become part of this place, or give something impossible. What do you want? Mira asked. The clock woman's gears turned slowly. A moment that no longer exists, a memory that never happened, a gift that breaks the rules of time. Kyle reached into his satchel and pulled out the paper, the one from the dream library, the one that said there's strength in staying too. He looked at it, then tore it. The hollow gasped. The air itself bent. Kyle could feel it, the moment breaking apart. A choice made in a dream unmade again, and the hollow released them. The statues sighed. The sundial's pieces stilled. The clockwoman smiled, gears clicking softly. You have given something rare, she said, a truth you were not ready to lose. And yet you did. You may pass. Beyond the hollow, the path reformed. Grass grew again. The stars began to move in proper time. And on the horizon, a shimmering light danced, like a mirage made of memory and promise. Kale took Mira's hand. We're close now, she said. He nodded, but something behind them watched, not with malice, not even with interest, only with expectation, because the Vale was waking, and the wellspring was listening. The morning came quietly, though neither Kale nor Mira saw the sun rise. Instead, the sky shifted from a pale indigo to a glowing opal mist, the clouds above forming delicate spirals like ink swirling in water. Beneath their feet, the earth softened to fine dust, then to pale sand shimmering with flecks of gold and violet. Before them stretched an endless, still lake. No ripples, no breeze, and at its center rose a small island, shimmering like a dream held together by silence and hope. The Isle of Glass Feathers, Mira whispered. Kyle stared. From this distance, the island looked like it had been plucked from a painting, filled with silver trees, floating lanterns, and something else. Wings. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of delicate glass feathers drifted across the air around the island. Some large as sails, others small as leaves. They sparkled and turned gently, dancing in a rhythm only the Vale understood. A wooden boat waited at the shore, already untethered, bobbing slightly, though there was no wind to move it. They stepped in. The boat glided on its own, silent as breath. As they neared the island, Kyle leaned over the edge to peer into the waters. His reflection was strange, not warped, not older, just different. He looked at himself, wearing unfamiliar armor, eyes filled with confidence and sadness. A version of Kyle who had made a different choice somewhere along the path. He blinked, and the reflection vanished. The boat came to rest at a dock made of pale bonewood. The trees on the island were unlike any they had seen before, white trunks with crystal leaves and hollow spaces where birds might nest, though none ever did. And above them, the glass feathers kept drifting. Some of them began to fall. Mira caught one in her hand. It was light, weightless even, and somehow humming. When she pressed it gently between her palms, a soft voice whispered, "My name was Elrin. I once wished to fly without falling. I never landed." Kyle blinked. "It's a memory?" Mira nodded. "No, it's a wish." They wandered further in. There were no creatures here, no footprints, no paths. But the air shimmered with hope and loss and longing. Soon they reached the center of the island, where a great tree stood. It had no bark, only strands of thread-like silver, woven like a nest, and hanging from every branch were cages, small ones. Each cage held a single glowing feather. "This is where forgotten wishes go," Mira said, her voice barely a breath. Kyle looked around. "Why cages?" "Because some dreams need to be protected, and some need to be kept from becoming real." A figure stepped from behind the trees. It was a child no older than 10, hair like spun frost, barefoot, eyes shining with the same light as the feathers. "You've come far," the child said, "and the wellspring waits, but first you must free one of the wishes and carry it with you." "Why?" Kyle asked. The child tilted their head. "Because no journey is complete without a burden. You choose." Kyle stepped forward. The feathers trembled. He reached up and chose a feather that shimmered with both sorrow and joy. As his fingers touched it, the cage opened. The voice whispered into his mind, "I wanted to be remembered, even if I was never known." The feather dissolved into light and entered Kale's chest. He gasped. It didn't hurt, but it changed him. Somewhere inside, a new weight settled. A silent story, a wish not his own, now part of him. The child smiled. "Then you may go." Mira looked at Kale with new understanding. "We're nearly there." "Yes," said the child. "The wellspring sleeps in the heart of the Vale. But to reach it, you must pass through the cavern that speaks your ending." Kyle nodded, still holding the space where the feather had touched him. He didn't feel afraid, only ready. And so, beneath the drifting feathers of a silent island, the two travelers stepped back into their little boat. As it drifted away, the island behind them faded, not into distance but into memory, because that's what the Isle of Glass Feathers had always been, a place that remembers the wishes you leave behind. The boat glided on, drifting out of the still lake and into a narrowing stream. Silver moss hung from blackened willows, their branches brushing gently against the water like long, bony fingers. The current, though faint, knew the way. It pulled them forward into a cave mouth carved in obsidian, tall, jagged, pulsing faintly with veins of emerald light. Neither Kale nor Mira spoke as they passed through the threshold. Speaking here would have felt disrespectful, like whispering, in a cathedral built from the bones of time itself. Inside, the darkness swallowed color. Their torches didn't burn. They glowed, casting soft light that couldn't reach the walls. The passage widened as they moved. The ceiling arched like the belly of some colossal sleeping beast. And then the cave spoke, not aloud, not in words, but in moments. Kale blinked, and he was standing alone in the center of the cavern, no longer holding Mira's hand. He saw himself older, weathered, alone, sitting beside a small hearth with a sword across his knees. The same feather wish still glowed faintly in his chest, but the warmth had faded. He had finished something, a journey, a life, then another. Vision Kale as a myth, his name spoken by children pretending to be brave, his face carved in stone outside a city he never visited. Then Kale as a shadow, forgotten, never having reached the wellspring, a warning instead of a tale. The cavern pulsed, its voice, if it could be called that, whispered within him, "This is not prophecy. These are your possible endings. All of them are true, and none of them are real yet." Mira stood beside him again, though she hadn't moved. Her eyes were wide with tears. "I saw myself," she said, "as a mother, as a villain, as a memory." They stood together in the vast silence. Then the cavern shifted. A staircase of stone and crystal unfolded ahead of them, curling downward into the earth like a spiral of fate. At its center, a doorway stood. The door wasn't made of stone, or wood, or glass. It was made of story. Shifting words danced across its surface. Names, battles, dreams, kisses, betrayals. Songs sung only once. Some were familiar, some were not yet written. Kyle reached out, his palm just brushing the surface. The door shuddered and opened. On the other side was not darkness. It was light, a soft field under a twilight sky. Wind kissed the long grass. A single river carved a silver path through the valley. In the distance, mountains glowed with a quiet fire, volcanoes that hadn't erupted in centuries. But most importantly, in the center of the field, a stone. Temple sat low, round, simple, and from within it came a pulse, not of sound but of meaning. A rhythm older than any map, older than any dream. Mira fell to her knees, breathless. "We're here," she said. Kyle nodded, though he felt hollow. Full, afraid, brave, the wellspring of the Vale. But they were not alone. At the edge of the temple's steps, something waited. Not a beast, not a god, not a monster, but a mirror, shaped like a person. It rose to meet them, and its form shifted constantly. One moment Kyle, the next Mira, then a child, then an old woman, then 100 faces they'd never known. Its voice was gentle and final. Only one may enter the wellspring. Only one may reshape what's to come. Kale and Mira turned to each other. The choice was near, and the Vale, ancient and breathing, held its breath. The air around the temple felt thick, not heavy, not choking, but sacred. The kind of stillness that lives inside cathedrals and untouched tombs. Wind didn't dare move. Even the stars seemed to slow their blinking above the silver fields. Kyle and Mira stood at the threshold of something eternal. Before them, the mirror being waited. Its form was neither man nor woman, beast nor shadow. It was reflection itself, a living echo of choice, constantly shifting into things they might become or already were, just not in this story. "Only one may enter," it said again, its voice made of echoes and heartbeats. Kyle looked to Mira, his jaw tight. He had not traveled this far to let another carry the burden, but neither had she. Both had walked through storms of memory, past forests that sang, over mountains that whispered their names. Mira reached out and placed her hand over his. "Let's not argue about who deserves it," she said. "Let's choose for the right reason." The mirror being gestured to the stone beneath them, and there, carved into the ground, were two paths, each made of shimmering crystal veins, one glowing gold, the other deep blue. They stretched around the temple, never touching, yet weaving, into the same center. Above each path floated a memory. The gold path showed Kyle. He stood before a city on fire, his blade broken, protecting a child who glowed with strange light. Around him stood others, heroes, forgotten beings, and Mira, aged and smiling. He had become a myth, a protector. The blue path showed Mira. She stood in a great tower, holding a globe of light. Around her knelt creatures of dream, fae, giants, shadows reborn. She whispered songs that reshaped the world. She had become a guide, a guardian of future fates. Both paths pulsed softly. Both led to the wellspring, and both required something in return. One would remember everything they'd seen. The other would forget the journey entirely, but carry the wellspring's gift outward. A silence settled. Then Kyle stepped forward and chose the blue path. "Let her remember," he said. "Let her shape what comes. I'll carry the light." Mira's eyes brimmed with tears, but not sadness, pride. She took the gold path, walking slowly, every step echoing in the twilight grass. The mirror being nodded and faded into mist. Inside the temple, Kale knelt before the wellspring. It wasn't a fountain or pool, it was a heart, vast and pulsing, suspended in the air, made of woven starlight, roots, feathers, and echoes. From it dripped light like honey, thick and slow, each drop containing an entire story never told. He reached forward. The moment his fingers touched the first drop, it dissolved into him, and everything changed. The Vale rewrote itself, not visibly, not violently, but like breath after a long silence. The land remembered itself, the stars adjusted, the rivers stopped forgetting where they were going. Kyle felt the journey slip away from his mind, piece by piece, the caves, the feathers, the hollow. Mira, even Mira, he stepped outside. The temple was quiet, the fields calm. Mira stood waiting, still holding every memory he had lost. He didn't recognize her, but he smiled, because something deep inside told him he had made the right choice. "Where now?" he asked. She took his hand. "Anywhere," she said. "The Vale is listening." And they walked forward together, one heart filled with memory, the other lit by the wellspring itself. Far beyond, the temple past dunes of stardust and plains where constellations bloom like flowers, Kyle and Mira journeyed on, one with memories, one with light. Their next destination came not from maps, but from a dream Mira had the night after the wellspring. A silver serpent curled around a city deep underground, its breath slow and eternal, its coils cradling something old and cursed, and waiting. They found the entrance beneath a forgotten monolith shaped like a fang. Carved into its base, barely legible, were the words, "Breathe quietly, lest the serpent stir." A stone stairwell spiraled down. Each step echoed as though struck inside a ribcage. Faint veins of greenish crystal ran through the stone, pulsing softly with every breath Kyle took. Soon they stepped into a cavern so vast they could see neither floor nor ceiling, just coils, massive, scaled, and gently rising and falling, wrapped. Within those endless rings of flesh and time was a city, Vale Rath. The buried crown, once a kingdom, now a secret. The air shimmered with sleep magic. Moss grew on forgotten towers. Lanterns floated between crumbled bridges, powered by nothing but the breath of the sleeping serpent. The city didn't look ruined. It looked paused. "We're walking through a memory," Mira said, "but one that hasn't ended yet." Kyle, still carrying the wellspring's light, felt strange here, like a firefly in a jar filled with ghosts. As they moved deeper into the city, they found statues of the original inhabitants. But these were no ordinary beings. They were taller than humans, with elongated limbs, antlered heads, and translucent robes carved to flutter in imaginary wind. Every statue had its mouth open, singing something no one could hear. And then they met the first one that wasn't stone. She called herself Olenya, and she stepped from the shadows wearing a crown made of snake bone and moonlight. "For you walk on sacred breath," she said. "The serpent dreams, the serpent remembers. What do you bring to disturb its sleep?" Mira stepped forward. "Not disturbance," she said. "Understanding." Olenya smiled with all her teeth. "Too many." "Then let me show you the choir." She led them beneath the palace ruins, through hallways lined with silver scales the size of shields. At the center was a cavern, a dome of living stone, where dozens of figures stood in a circle, cloaked in silence, their bodies swaying ever so slightly. "These are the dream singers," Olenya whispered, "each of them bound to a fragment of the serpent's mind. If they stop singing, even for a breath, the serpent wakes." Kyle shivered. "And if it wakes?" Olenya's smile faded. "Then time rewinds." Mira stiffened. "The veil unravels. Everything becomes nothing, and then starts again, and again, until we forget we're repeating." But Kyle noticed something. One of the dream singers was fading, not dying, being forgotten. The veil's balance had shifted since they touched the wellspring. The gift he carried was radiating memory, but it was overwhelming the fragile dream balance here. "We've already disturbed the serpent," Mira realized aloud. The chamber trembled faintly. A breath. From below, Olenya turned sharply. "You must choose. Give up the wellspring's light, or sing with us until your lungs fail." Kyle hesitated. The gift had been his burden, but now it might unmake the world beneath this sleeping god. So, slowly, painfully, Kyle removed the featherlight. From his chest it resisted, burned, then lifted. It floated toward one of the fading dream singers and merged with their song, their voice strengthened. The tremble stopped. The serpent exhaled and slept. Kyle fell to his knees, weaker now, but lighter. Olenya bowed her many-antlered head. "You gave up something most never earned," she said, "and saved more than you know." Mira helped him to his feet. "Let's leave before something else tries to dream," she said. They walked back through the stillness of Vale Rath, no longer strangers, no longer visitors, but remembered. Beyond Vale Rath, the path grew tangled and strange. Where before the air had shimmered with magic, here it shimmered with memory. Not theirs, but that of the forest they now approached. The sky dimmed to a soft bronze, and the ground crunched with leaves that hadn't fallen yet. "This is the clockroot grove," Mira whispered, staring at the trees. "They say time grows in circles here, and can snap." Kale, still weary from giving up the wellspring's light, leaned on a walking staff shaped from one of the temple's stones. He could feel something pulsing beneath the soil. Not danger exactly, just potential. The trees were tall and gnarled, their bark spiraling with etched patterns. Some grew upside down, their roots reaching toward the clouds. Others were covered in golden moss that blinked. But the thorns, oh, the thorns, thick and black, twisted around everything like living barbed wire. They pulsed faintly, as if drinking, the forest's hours. As they stepped into the grove, the air shifted. Kyle blinked. Suddenly he was alone. The grove had separated them. Mira wandered a path that was both now and not now. To her left, she saw herself as a child, chasing glowing beetles with her brother, long lost to the drought wars. To her right, she glimpsed a version of herself, wearing a crown, hands stained with ink and regret, standing in a ruined library beneath a black sun. Every step twisted the forest around her. "Clockroot doesn't just bend time," she murmured. "It feeds on your choices." She kept walking, past scenes that had never happened, or hadn't happened yet. Then she saw Kale lying beneath a tree. Still. Elsewhere, Kale stood before a tree that grew like a spiral staircase, each step a year of his life carved in bark. Faces appeared in the trunk, people he'd helped, harmed, forgotten. The tree whispered, "Climb and know who you could have been." But Kyle turned away. He had learned in Vale the price of knowing too much. Instead, he walked a path lined with broken hourglasses. At its end, he found a clearing where Mira knelt, weeping before a tangled mess of vines. Something inside them glowed. It was a clock, with his heartbeat inside. She turned, startled. "Kyle? Are you real?" He knelt beside her and reached for the vines. They reared back, hissing, curling, but Mira grabbed his wrist. "Don't pull, let it unwind." And slowly together they breathed, in rhythm. Letting the moment stretch and soften, the thorns melted away. The clock shattered gently, its heartbeat rising into the sky like a bird freed from its cage. The forest stilled, and then it opened. The trees bent aside in silent thanks, revealing a path that hadn't existed before, a ribbon of silvered wood and singing dust. Kyle and Mira stood side by side, changed, again. "Time tried to trap us," she said. "But we're not loops," he replied. "We're stories." And they walked. So when they left Clockroot Grove, the air was lighter, as though the forest had been pressing down on their lungs for days. Ahead stretched a highland path scattered with wind-worn stones, leading to the edge of something vast and invisible. The land stopped abruptly, and beyond it, floating in a sea of pale sky, were the isles of living mist. Dozens of landmasses drifted on air currents, unanchored and slow-moving. Some were no larger than wagons. Others held forests, ruins, or towers perched on their backs like ornaments. Mist curled beneath them, thick and alive, rising like ocean waves. At the edge of the cliff stood a man with no face. He wore a long, dark coat stitched with patches from every age, cloth from ancient empires, war banners, priestly robes. Where his face should be was simply shifting smoke. "Name yourselves," he said in a windless voice. Kyle and Mira hesitated. "I'm Mira, once of the South Hollow, keeper of echoes. This is Kale, who carried the wellspring and gave it away." The faceless man tilted his head. "Then you may enter the mists, but be warned, memory drifts here. Anchor yourselves or forget who you were." He stepped aside, and a bridge of woven fog took shape, trembling gently. Crossing was disorienting. Every step twisted the path slightly. Forward felt sideways, up seemed slow. Mira gripped Kyle's hand tightly, whispering their names to keep them grounded. The first isle they reached was a field of soft grass and ancient bones. Statues of winged creatures, griffins, manticores, wyverns, stood crumbled in place, half buried in green. A wind chime made of feathers and teeth hung from a lonely tree. This was the sanctuary, Mira said softly, where wounded beasts came to forget their pain. Kyle kneeled beside a broken stone that read, "When you can no longer fly, dream until you float." And for a moment, they did. Their feet rose an inch above the ground. The mist had accepted them. His second isle was far darker, a maze of bridges and archways made of black crystal. Within each crystal shimmered reflections of Kale and Mira, but not as they were, as they might have been. Mira, crowned in fire. Kale, with a sword made of stars. Another, Mira corrupted, her eyes pitch black, whispering curses into a ruined book. "These are cast-offs," Kyle said. "Possibilities we didn't choose." One reflection turned to face him directly. It smiled, and stepped out of the glass. A fight in mist is like trying to duel with a memory. The shadow Kale moved fast, but predictably. He was fear, not flesh. Mira shouted ancient words, her voice binding the false form with sound. The shadow screeched and collapsed into shards. "We must keep moving," she said. "If we linger, we become part of it." The final aisle was silent, just a platform of stone and stillness. At its center, an altar of glass, within which floated a single feather. Pulsed with their heartbeat. "Her piece of you was left behind in the Vale," said a new voice, female, deep and resonant. A creature made of mist rose around the altar with the outline of an owl and wings that stretched across the sky. "Would you take it back, or leave it forever?" Kyle stepped forward. "I gave it up willingly." "Then it is yours no longer," the being said, "but you may have something else. The ability to walk through the dreams of the land itself." She brushed her wing across their chests. Both Kale and Mira gasped. Suddenly they could feel the breath of the Vale, the slumbering forests, the dreaming rivers, the old ruins, hoping someone would remember their names. The aisles hummed, the mists gathered, and the bridges began to lead them back to the world of solid ground. As they stepped onto the next cliffside, leaving the floating dream isles behind, Mira whispered, "We're changing, not just surviving." Kyle nodded, gazing at the horizon, "And we're getting closer to the place where all this began." Kyle and Mira descended from the cliffs just as a pale dawn threatened the sky. But the light was strange here, grayer than gold, heavy rather than warm. The land ahead stretched wide and flat, its soil dark as ash, cracked like old parchment. Nothing moved, nothing sang. This was Viramore. Once, it was said to be the spine of a long-dead god. Now it was a dead plain haunted by what remained of its breath. They walked in silence, their footsteps muffled by dry moss and bone dust. The landscape was scattered with strange hills, shaped like hunched figures. At first, Kyle thought they were stone, but then one of them shifted, just slightly, and he realized. "They're bones," Mira whispered, her voice hollow with awe. "Not hills, ribs. Massive, curved, weather-worn. The bones of giants, or perhaps a single colossal thing that died trying to rise. This place remembers what tried to stand here," Mira continued, "and it mourns it still." As they journeyed deeper, the wind picked up, but it didn't carry sound. It carried echoes, snatches of voices not their own. "Where are my hands? I dream of falling forever. They built me too tall." Kyle paused near a shallow crater filled with stone spears. Some had shattered, others pulsed faintly. "Those aren't weapons," he said. "They're teeth." Suddenly the earth beneath them shifted, like a breath drawn in reverse. A long tremor rolled across the moor, and in the distance, one of the rib bones shuddered upright, piercing the sky like a horn. From beneath it rose a shape, tall, staggering, wrapped in vines and old armor. A giant, blind but awake, stitched together by memory and the Vale's grief, its head turned slowly toward them. "You wear the scent of the Isles," it said, its voice like mountains grinding. "We were given permission to walk," Mira replied. "We seek the place where the Vale was born. The giant reached into its own chest and pulled out a key made of marrow and moonlight. "Then take this," it rumbled, "to open the gate of the last garden." Kyle stepped forward and accepted it. The key was warm, beating faintly like a heart. "Thank you," he said. "Why help us?" The giant paused, then said, "Because I remember what it was to hope." And with that, the bones around it began to settle, not into death, but into peace. The land grew still once more. As night returned, Kyle and Mira camped beside the spine of the world. They said little. But as Mira drifted to sleep, Kyle stared at the key in his hand, its pulse steady. There was something waiting at the heart of the Vale, something buried, or something calling them home. The moor faded behind them as Kyle and Mira followed a thin stream of silver water that flowed uphill, winding through fog and memories. The stream pulsed softly, like a vein, and the air smelled of crushed petals and old stone. Flowers bloomed where they stepped, not ordinary flowers, but ghostly ones with translucent petals, each bearing the whisper of a long-forgotten name. "The Vale is guiding us," Mira murmured, brushing her fingers over a bloom shaped like a small open eye. At the top of the hill stood a wall. It wasn't stone, nor wood. It was woven from time itself. Long ribbons of daylight and nightfall wrapped tightly, veined with constellations and rain, and in the center of it, a gate, shaped like a doorway cut from starlight. No hinges, no latch, just a lock that shimmered with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Kyle stepped forward and held up the bone key given by the giant of Viramore. The gate sang softly, like wind chimes in a dream. Then it opened. Inside was the last garden, but it was not quiet. It was alive in a way that defied silence. Plants pulsed with color and memory. Trees grew upside down, their roots bearing fruit. Rivers hung suspended in the air, curling like vines. Birds made of leaves flew backward, and in the center of it all, on a throne of roots and feathers, sat a woman with no eyes, yet she watched them with perfect clarity. Her hair was braided with moons. "Welcome," she said. "You carry the weight of many places, but few reach here unchanged." Mira bowed slightly. Kyle did not speak. "Why have you come?" the woman asked, her voice soft yet vast. "We seek the origin," Kyle said. "The first whisper, the source of the Vale." The woman nodded once. "Then you must walk the garden's paths. There are 3, each a root of the Vale's birth. Choose one." The paths opened behind her, a corridor of golden thorns, pulsing with heat. A staircase of frozen mist spiraling into the clouds. A hollow tree so large it had a sky of its own inside. Kyle and Mira glanced at each other. Without words, they chose the tree. Inside, the bark gave way to a world of stars. They stood on a platform woven of leaves that whispered secrets. Around them, memories drifted like fireflies. Each light held a choice someone had once made. A beast spared. A lie told to protect a friend. A step backward instead of forward. "These are the roots of the Vale," Mira whispered. "Not land, not magic. Decisions." A figure rose from the base of the tree. It wore Kale's face, but its eyes were hollow. Its hands carried every regret Kale had buried. "This is your final trial," the woman's voice echoed from the leaves. "Can you forgive the you that almost was?" Kyle stepped forward. So did the echo. They touched hands, and for a moment the tree went still. Kale's eyes opened wide, and the garden changed. Where once it pulsed with chaos, now it breathed, balanced. The path reformed beneath them, and the woman reappeared. "You have seen the root," she said, "but there are still 2 more to find. The Vale is not yet whole, and neither are you." As they left the last garden, the sky overhead cracked softly open, revealing a sliver of a second moon. It had not been there before, and in that silver glow, Kyle and Mira walked on, knowing the deeper they went, the less of themselves they could afford to leave behind. They followed the light of the second moon, its strange silver glow casting long, shifting shadows across the land. The trees grew twisted here, not corrupted but carved by time and air. Their branches pointed inward, as though bowing towards some silent center. By morning, the path had vanished. There was no trail, no birdsong, no whisper from the Vale. Only a stillness that was too perfect. Mira stopped and whispered, "We're near it. The wind tomb." Kale nodded. He could feel it too, pressure in the air, like standing before a storm that hadn't yet begun. Then, without warning, they heard it. A voice, clear as a bell, beautiful, wordless. It rang through the air like music, though no lips had spoken it. They had entered the wind tomb of St. Eli. The tomb itself was not a structure. It was a valley, cut deep into the mountain, where every gust of air carried a memory. Cries of love, last words, warnings, names shouted into the dark. St. Eli, it was said, had once silenced a war by breathing in every scream and burying them here. And now, they whispered constantly, "Please, not him. Take me instead. Tell her I waited." The lantern was never meant to be lit. Kyle and Mira descended carefully, wrapping scarves over their mouths. The air tried to steal their words, pulling sound from their throats before it could form. Mira pointed to a structure at the valley's heart, a spire made of bones and glass, turning slowly in the wind. Inside it, floating above a shallow pool, was a wind chime made of crystal teeth, the heart of the tomb. But they weren't alone. Shapes moved between the stones. Echo hunters, half flesh, half breeze, these creatures fed on noise. Tall and bent backward, their mouths opened where ears should be, devouring the smallest sounds. They stalked the tomb, to silence any who disturbed it. One turned toward Kale, its body fluttering like smoke. "Don't speak," Mira whispered into his mind. "Only gesture. The wind is listening." They crept carefully toward the tower. Each footstep stirred voices from the ground. "Why did you leave me?" "It hurts less if you forget." Kyle reached the base of the spire, and beneath the chime saw a small pedestal with a carved inscription. "To release what was silenced, give it your own truth." Mira touched the pedestal and closed her eyes. Then, in the quietest whisper she could manage, she spoke, "I never wanted to leave the hollow." The pedestal glowed. Kyle stepped forward and whispered, "I was afraid to become more than a guide." The wind around them shifted. Suddenly the echo hunters cried out, shrill, pained, recoiling. The whispers in the valley began to rise in tone and power, overlapping into a chaotic chorus. Then, silence. Perfect. Complete. The chime fell still, and, from above, a shape descended. A woman with hair like flowing air, eyes shut in eternal sleep. St. Eli. She reached into her chest and pulled free a spiral of silver mist, a breath, ancient and unspent. "You have spoken your truth." Her voice came not from her mouth, but the wind. "You are now bound by it. Take this breath. Use it only when silence becomes unbearable." Kyle took the spiral of mist, and for a moment, the world breathed with them. As they left the tomb, Mira finally spoke aloud. "I think the Vale is preparing us, one memory at a time." Kyle nodded, his voice quiet, "because the final place isn't just old, it's ours." The stars had realigned. Above Kyle and Mira, the second moon vanished without warning, as if swallowed. The air was dense, not with fog, but with anticipation, as though the land itself knew they approached something sacred. The path led downward, and downward, and downward still, beneath stone, beneath shadow, beneath even memory. They entered a cavern so vast that the walls disappeared into darkness. The ceiling shimmered like a frozen ocean above them, catching flickers of thought. This was the vault of the first dream, not a place of stone or magic, but a living dream the Vale had buried deep within itself. Mira trembled as they stepped inside. "This is older than language," she whispered, "older than the gods. This is where the Vale began to imagine itself." All around them, flickering visions appeared, shifting rapidly. A sword made of morning dew, a child riding a cloud shaped like a serpent, a creature with no face building a door in the sky. These were not illusions, they were possibilities, dreams that had once almost become real. Kale reached out, brushing a vision of his younger self, one who never left the Starlit Isles, who lived quietly, safely. But it dissolved like steam. "Be careful," Mira said. "This place tests you with everything you almost were." At the vault's center stood a pedestal. Upon it, a mirror, smooth obsidian black. It reflected nothing. "We've come this far," Kyle said. "Together." They stepped forward and placed their hands on the mirror. The world shattered. Suddenly, Kale and Mira stood in a realm made entirely of starlight and silence. Floating before them was the Vale, not the land, but the spirit of it. A massive figure cloaked in clouds and roots, its eyes shifting between suns and rain. "You carry what I once was," it said, its voice both ancient and young. "And now you must choose what I shall become." Visions unfolded around them, a golden age, where the Vale became a place of healing and renewal. A sealed realm kept hidden forever to protect what remained pure. A rebirth where the Vale spread, touching every land but at a cost. The spirit waited. Kyle looked to Mira. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We've seen its sorrow, but we've also seen its wonder." Kyle stepped forward. "Let the Vale be reborn," he said. "Not hidden, not forgotten. Let others find its paths, let them remember." The spirit raised a hand and placed it over their hearts. "Then you will be my stewards," it said, "walkers between dream and dust, guardians of what still whispers." The starlight engulfed them. When they awoke, they were back atop the highest hill in the Vale, but the world was different. Beneath them, the forests had shifted. The rivers ran new paths. Cities sparkled in the distance, built by dreamers who had found their way here. The Vale was open, alive, and at its heart, two figures stood. Kyle and Mira, travelers, friends, stewards of the starlit Vale. As you drift now, into sleep, may the Vale greet you in dreams, and should you ever wake in a place that feels a little too quiet, a little too alive, perhaps you've found your way back to it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the starlit paths of the Vale. I'm SagaTwist, and it's been an honor to guide you through another night of wonder, whispers, and magic, as the last. Dream drifts quietly into the dark, and the world softens around you. Let go of the weight of the day. Sleep gently, knowing the stories will wait, always waiting, for the moment your eyes close and the stars call again. Until next time, dream. Bravely rest deeply, and remember, the Vale remembers all who listen. Good night, traveler, and sweet dreams from SagaTwist.